Hello, folks. Welcome to our webinar today on convincing your stakeholders that now, next, later works best. I'll just introduce myself very quickly. I'm Megan. I'm the CMO here at ProdPad. And yeah, what we're going to cover today is how to go about winning buy-in from your stakeholders, from your team, to make the move to the now, next, later road mapping approach, how to get everyone convinced that it is the right decision for your organization. First, just a bit of housekeeping. We are going to make sure there is time at the end for a Q&A. So please, whenever you think of a question whilst Janna is talking, please pop it in the Q&A box. So you'll see across from the chat, there's a box there specifically for those questions. So throw them in at any point during the webinar. We'll make sure there's time at the end. We'll come back to them and go through them all, and Janna will answer them. Also, just to say that this webinar is just 1 hour. Apologies to any of you that have a daunting 90-minute slot there in your diary. It's not. We're going to keep this to an hour. Obviously, feel free to use the chat at any point. We will, after this webinar, send you a recording. And the content that Janna is going to be sharing today is actually a slide deck that you can download yourselves as a template and use it, edit it, adapt it, do whatever you want, use it with your own stakeholders. So let me introduce you to Janna Bastow. Many of you will be regular ProdPad webinar attendees and know Janna. Janna is a product management guru. She is, in fact, along with her co-founder of ProdPad, Simon Cast, the inventor of the Now Next Later roadmap. She's co-founder of Mind the Product, co-founder and CEO of ProdPad. So today, as I say, she's going to walk you through all the arguments you'll need to present to your team and to your stakeholders to win their buy-in, to move to agile road mapping and the Now Next Later format. As I say, Janna is going to take you through a ready-made presentation slide deck that you'll be able to download, edit and use yourself, and we will email that link to you at the end, but you'll also see a QR code that you can snap at the end. Without further ado, I will hand you over to Janna.
Excellent. Hey, thanks so much, Megan. And hey, everybody, thanks for coming along today. Reason why we chose this subject is because it's the one that vexes product people the most. We talk about now, next, later until the cows come home, and product people get it. But when they try to bring it into their teams, this is where they start hitting objections and friction. Now, we have coached literally thousands of teams, helped so many teams move from timeline road mapping to now, next, later. We've got a few tricks and ways that you can start bringing them on board with this. So we're going to share that with you today. And as Megan said, we're going to be using a particular part of this slide deck that you can take for yourself to use in-house to convince your product people, or the rest of your team, sorry, not the product people, the everybody else, that now, next, later is the way to go. So let's jump in. But before we get too far, I just want to introduce you to ProdPad. Some of you are already using it, which is great. Thank you so much for your support. Some of you, this might be new to you. ProdPad is a tool that was built by myself and my co-founder, Simon, back when we were product managers ourselves, basically because we needed tools to do our own job. We needed something to keep track of all those experiments and all that customer feedback and to create a roadmap that would show people in the team where we're going. So we built something. And so what we realized is that ProdPad was something that's going to give us control and help us organize our work and provide transparency into the product management space. So people stopped wondering what us product people were up to and why we kept making decisions like we do. And what it does, it helps you create a single source of truth for your product decisions, for your product work. So nowadays it's used by thousands of teams around the world. It's a tool that you can try for free. We have a free trial. You can jump in and start using it right away. And we also have a sandbox mode in ProdPad. That's basically a version of ProdPad that's preloaded with example data like lean roadmaps and OKRs and feedback and experiments and all this other stuff sat in one place. So you can move it around, you can try it out, and you can see how it's going to work for you. And our team is made up of product people. So it was founded by a couple of product people, and we've got product people throughout the team as well. And so we are constantly looking to learn and iterate and adjust. So we'd love to hear your feedback. Jump in, give it a try, and let us know. And I also want to highlight some really cool stuff that we've been working on, right? We're constantly iterating ProdPad, as I said. But one of the really interesting areas that we dove into last year was AI, right? We got our hands on the GPT API and started playing around, and we realized that we could enable product managers to reduce so much of their grunt work by making it easy to generate ideas and to flesh those ideas out, have it answer questions like how you might measure target outcomes or whether this idea is actually any good. You can compare those ideas to your vision. You've got your objectives. A lot of you are probably working on your OKRs right now. You've got your high level objectives. This will help you brainstorm key results, and not just any key results, but we've tweaked it to give you results that are outcome focused and leading metrics to measure your objectives by. And it gives you feedback on stuff, right? We didn't just want something that generates stuff. We wanted something that could be like your sidekick, like your coach. And so you can take things like your product vision, which you've got in ProdPad, and it'll give feedback on it and tell you how to strengthen that vision and iterate on it. And we've also built out, this is the newest piece of it, a chatbot that you can talk to and get product insights, product advice, but also it knows what's going on in your ProdPad account. So you can ask it questions like, hey, what should we work on based on what our customers have been asking for? Or can you give me feedback on this roadmap? Or can you help me identify things that we could put on the roadmap that would match with our objectives? So it has this sort of insight and it's available for you to jump in and give it a try. So I would love your feedback on that. And ProdPad is a tool that you can start a free trial for. So jump in, give it a try, and let us know what you think. Now, on that note, I want to start talking you through how to get people over to the now, next, later format of ProdPad, right? Because of a roadmap, which is the format that we use within ProdPad. The thing is that you've got to think about who you're presenting to. Who is it you're actually trying to get on board? You're going to have a lot of people often within your company who don't want to move away from a timeline roadmap for various different reasons. And so we're going to look at how to get your exec leadership team on board, show them the benefits of why you should be working in an agile road mapping format like now, next, later, as opposed to the timeline that you've been using for the last few years. But also, we're going to help you get other departments on board with this, right? So let's say it's your sales team who is holding on to that timeline roadmap and those delivery dates that they used to promise. What about your marketing team, or what about your customer facing teams? So there's different stakeholders within your business who might have different reasons why they object to moving away. And so we're going to give you some tips on objection handling. So really, you need to understand who it is that you're going to appeal to, who it is in your particular company, like who is your tricky stakeholder, and you might have more than one. And from there, we can start looking at ways to successfully win them over. So before we craft our arguments on to persuade these stakeholders, let's try and understand the reasons why they've got preferences for timelines. What is it that they think timelines give them? What makes them think that they're necessary? Let's start at the top here. Your big bosses. Bosses, your exec team, they like deadlines. Deadlines give them a sense of control, or at least a sense of security that everything's going to go according to plan. And timeline blankets are like a security blanket for them. They're a comfort blanket. They reassure them that everything is working. In some organizations, you can find that the business leadership will lack trust that any department's not explicitly commercial, so your sales and marketing teams, that they don't trust that they have a mature enough appreciation for the commercial imperatives of the business. They think it's necessary for the non-commercial teams, those who don't have enough revenue, who don't focus enough on revenue to appreciate the urgency, to have deadlines and dates. So those people who do understand this urgency can push them and drive that pace. So this is how leadership can easily enforce pace and help them clearly see when it's not being delivered. But it's also important to understand that sometimes leadership, especially in organizations who are transitioning from that traditional business model to more of a platform or SaaS model, can have a mindset that's a bit of a hang up from the days of selling individual one-off products or instances of a product to individual customers, right? They're doing custom work. So it's not uncommon to have deadline expectations coming from your exec team as a hangover from that. I call it the agency trap, right? When companies are working in more of an IT project or agency model. And put it this way, software agencies need dates and deadlines because they're running with a very defined project, right? A client gives them a scope and a time and a cost, and they deliver to that. They have billable hours and a specific quote to meet. And these are paying customers waiting for delivery of the product by a certain date and possibly contractual obligations to meet. Um, but if you're not an agency, this isn't how you should operate. It's what I call the agency trap when product companies act like agencies taking on custom work, and it takes away the time that they have to spend in discovery work. So we're going to address that one. Um, Also, bear in mind that some of the pressure you might be feeling from leadership is actually transferred pressure, right? It's from outside forces. They might have stakeholders of their own. It might be investors or customers who are pushing on them to get these dates. So you'll need to show the execs how they can manage investor or board reporting or manage other teams around these dates as well. So this is why getting your execs on board is so important. Now, sales teams are the other particularly vocal stakeholder group when it comes to ditching the timeline, right? This is the other group that's going to give you problems. And why is that? What is their problem? They might run into fears. They might have fears like they're no longer able to make commitments to their prospects, which screws up their plans on how they're going to close deals. This is particularly painful if the company is running in that sort of agency style mode as opposed to thinking about themselves being a product company. They're worried that delivery is going to slow down if there's no deadline pressures. So, similar to what your execs sometimes think. And they're also sometimes afraid that they might look foolish if the roadmap pivots, if you change something that's on the roadmap. So we're going to talk about these types of fears as well. And then you get marketing, right? So marketing might be concerned with how they're supposed to plan campaigns and launch stuff without a timeline if they don't have an idea as to when something is going to be out there. But we can talk about how we can work with these fears as well. And then your customer teams, they're going to be primarily concerned with how they can confidently respond to customer questions. Customers are going to be wondering what it is that you're actually up to and whether you're building into the direction that makes sense for them. And so your customer teams are going to want to cite as to what's going on as well. So we're going to look at how we can win over each of these stakeholders and get them all on board with the now, next, later way of working. So the way that I really recommend doing this is to get your stakeholders in a room and show them the light. Show them what they've been missing because oftentimes they don't understand why you're making this change. And so if you can explain to them where you're coming from, what the value is for their particular function and for the business, you can start getting people on board. One of the best ways to do this is to get people into a room together. A Zoom room is fine, right? But what you want to do is share with them the values of a now, next, later roadmap and make sure that they're on board with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some slides that we've created that we're going to hand out to you afterwards that you can use for your own stakeholders. So these next slides are ones that you can take home. And the slides themselves also have cues in the slide notes, presenter notes, so you can follow along and use that to get people on board. So keeping in mind that we are coming from a place where we have convinced or we've helped people, thousands of companies convince their bosses and their teams to get on board with it. This is basically the formula, that points that you can use. Now, because this is a take-home thing that you can use for your own company, feel free to make adjustments, right? If there's a different stakeholder you want to take in or take out or address a particular concern, change these around, right? Chop and change these as you see fit. But here's a way that you can start doing it. So imagine that you've got your hands on this deck and you're convincing the rest of your stakeholders. Here's where you might start. So first of all, you want to bring them in and start talking about why better roadmap is going to get you better results. This isn't just about you removing the pressure of having to put dates, or you're not too lazy to go get estimates from the rest of your team. You're doing this to get better results for your team. This is about driving high value outcomes for your company. So this is the frame of mind that we're going to start this argument in, this conversation in. And what you're looking to do is help them move from timeline road mapping to agile road mapping. So point out what it is that you're trying to do. Your proposal here is to move from one format to the other format. And what we're going to do is talk them through what the now, next, later format is and how the timeline roadmap format hasn't been working for them. Point out the cracks in this facade and start bringing forward this new idea. So again, this is very much an outcome focus. This is all about delivering solutions that are or to strategically important problems and measuring those results. So you're going to provide more to them. You're not taking something away. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be making a promise, right? You're going to be promising these different things that you could do for the company. One, like delivery will speed up. You will be able to deliver faster using a timeline, sorry, a now, next, later roadmap, because you're not caught up in trying to do all of the project management estimations before you jump in and try to solve the problems. You'll be shipping more. You'll be driving better results, right? You're driving towards outcomes rather than just a whole bunch of outputs, a bunch of features. You'll be responding faster to new opportunities and therefore not missing opportunities in the market, which is so important in this world when everything just changes on a dime every few months, it seems. You're going to be better strategically aligned. So you're going to be using cases like this to make you're going to be making a case around how it aligns the whole team around it by having a simpler roadmap that identifies what your strategy is, as opposed to just having a list of features and things to do. And you're going to be operating with greater efficiency, less waste. There's a reason we call it the lean roadmap format, is that it's less wasteful. And finally, you should be able to make the case that it will help you retain staff, right? No more sad developers who are leaving because it's full of tech debt and they're sick of building just feature after feature with no real cause. So I'm going to expand on each of these more later so that you have the points to drive these home. And those are going to be included in this deck. So first of all, make sure people know what you mean by agile road mapping. And we use the term agile road mapping, now, next, later road mapping and agile road mapping. They go all by different names. Call it what you want, right? Call it whatever seems to work for your particular company. But I like the term agile because it speaks to that broader approach, the agile methodology, which allows for flexibility. It's there for continuous improvement and rapid response to change. And so therefore, agile road mapping has been adopted into road mapping, or the agile methodology has been adopted into your road mapping methods. And that's how you get this now, next, later. So we're definitely going to try to focus and sell people on the fact that this is outcome, not output focused, right? You're not just taking away dates, you're actually giving them something, the outcomes here. You're bringing the company into a more customer-centric way of thinking so that the problems are organized around customer problems to solve. You are structuring with broad time horizons rather than rigid deadlines. And so this is really important because this gives you that flexibility, but still gives people a sense of direction and pace and distance, how far something is from being done now. And really, most importantly, it's flexible. It gives you space for learning. So these are the things that you're going to want to share with people as you are getting them on board with your now, next, later way of working. So you can then introduce that now, next, later roadmap as a specific way of doing agile road mapping. So this is the approach that was invented by myself and Simon. It actually came out of the fact that we were building ProdPad in its early days and started looking at ways that we could build a roadmap that wouldn't trap people. And so really, we wanted to end the focus on features and deadline in favor of a greater emphasis on discovery. And it's now being used by literally thousands of teams around the world. So many product managers are now using this. And we've got proven cases of how this has helped teams deliver more and be more outcome focused. It's also an easy to understand format, right? It's not convoluted with a whole bunch of junk. It helps you, it's inherently strategically aligned because I like to think of it as a prototype for your strategy, a way to outline your high level strategic steps before you dive in too deep. It gives you that flexibility so that you can change things on the fly based on insights that you get at the strategic level. And it's inherently outcome focused, right? Each of the things on your roadmap are going to be tied back to the outcomes that you're looking to get for each of them. And it's the most customer centric approach to road mapping. because what it's doing is giving you clarity on what those customer facing problems are and outlining how you're going to go about solving those problems. So then you can start diving into deeper, right? So how does the now next later roadmap work? As I've said, it's often referred to as a lean roadmap or a time horizon roadmap. Now, next, later are the time horizons. The ones that are in the now column are your well understood problems with defined solutions and committed development resources. This is stuff that a team is working on right now. You've got your next column, which is the problems that are generally at design or discovery stage with some assumptions that you need to validate before committing those resources. And then you've got your later column, right? These are your aspirations. These are the things that are a bit fuzzy and are still taking form. They're on the horizon in the distance. Although we do know that we want to solve them if we want to get to the big vision for our company. And so basically, as you start working on things, you'll take things from your later and you'll break them down into more detail and they'll move into your next. And then you'll break them down in more detail and they'll become part of your now. And it's not fully linear. Anybody who's made a roadmap knows that your roadmap is not linear. And this isn't trying to be. What it's doing is mapping out what you understand the product space in front of you looks like. If this is what we tackle now, then what are we going to tackle next? And what are we going to tackle further off in the distance? And as you take steps, think of these cards on the roadmap as stepping stones. As you take steps and you get closer to that future vision, you're going to adjust and you're going to say, oh, now that we can see more, we might actually take this direction instead. And you shuffle the direction of these cards depending on what you learn. So it's inherently a flexible roadmap that changes as you learn more. You also might call your roadmap columns different things, right? One of my favorite takes on it is calling the now, next, later columns doing, discovering, dreaming, because they outline the things that you're going to be doing at those particular times during that far out on the roadmap. The things that are in the doing are what you're doing right now. Things in the second column are what you're discovering. And the later column, the third column, is your dreaming, right? Here's where you'd like to get to, but you'll figure it out as you get a bit closer as well. Other teams like to wean themselves off the timeline roadmap. One way that really helps helps people move over is to move from their usual timeline roadmap into something that has more of a fuzzy this quarter, next quarter, Q3 plus, right? And that way you're getting people used to this sense of time horizons and they're getting fuzzy as they get further away, but not taking away those dates on day one. Once they get used to the Q1, Q2, Q3 plus plus sort of format, you can start bringing them closer and changing the wording to now, next, later. And that way you're not stuck with things within particular columns. But what's important is that understanding that the maturity of initiatives in each horizon. So now is where you've got a more granular area of focus, and whereas initiatives that are in the later are broad, high level, they're subject to change as you discover more about them. And as initiatives move from right to left, they develop, they evolve, they mature. And by the now column, they're known pieces of work, specs that are being written, delivery dates are being planned, development work is being done. And I can see that Chris is saying in the chat here that they found that Q1, Q2, Q3 plus plus to be a good safety feeling for people, right? It feels more tangible to them. And I agree with this. It's a really good way to get people on board with this. And there's no shame in having dates like that on your roadmap, on your now, next, later roadmap, because you're still going to be getting most of the benefits of it. It's still going to be outcome focused. It's still going to be customer centric. It's still going to be easy to understand. And it's always something that you can change later as people get more used to the 3-column view. So, how it works. You're going to be talking to people about how you're going to be populating this roadmap with, or basically instead of populating your roadmap with features to be built, your now, next, later roadmap contains what we call initiatives or roadmap cards, or these chunky blocks, the big white blocks on the roadmap. And I like to think of them as problems to solve or opportunities or areas of focus. And within those initiatives are then a series of different ideas that could be worked on to try to solve that problem. We call them ideas in ProdPad land, but I like to think of them as experiments as well, because what you're basically saying is we're going to find several ways to experiment and solve this problem in order to reach the goal that's on our roadmap. And by using experiments, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to think about how you're going to solve this problem. You're not meant to do all your experiments. There's a bunch of ways that you could solve this problem. And so really you're changing it from our roadmap is a list of things that we will do, and instead it's a list of problems we want to solve, and then broken down into how might we solve this problem? We could try this and this. And as you work your way through, you get better at understanding how that problem is going to be broken down, and you start tackling that problem. You start working towards your outcome. So the other key thing is that initiatives on the roadmap should be linked to at least one of your core product or company objectives, right? Those objectives are the green line or the blue line or the pink line at the top. These are all things that help you identify the why. Why are we doing this? Why would we solve this problem? And so you should be able to create a roadmap that you can collapse down. And ProdPad offers these collapsed views. You should be able to collapse it down and squidge your eyes and just get a sense as to what your roadmap is about, what your product strategy is. Are you growing your user base up front and then getting revenue? Or are you going to tackle revenue and then market share, or tackle the churn problem first? So you should be able to see these almost trends within your roadmap that will help outline what your overall product strategy is. And then you break it down into more detail about what problem you're going to solve, and then break that down into even more detail about how you might solve that problem. So that's the gist of how it works. Now, there's more on this that we can teach you, but we're not going to dive into that because there's a lot of nuances about how to do road mapping. I'll show you a course afterwards that allows you to dive into this stuff in more detail. But we're all at this level, when you're bringing this to your team, they don't need to know all the nuances. What you want to do is sell them on the benefits. So what is it that they actually get from this? Let's go through these. I mentioned this is the same list that I mentioned earlier, so we're going to dive into these in more detail. Because Now Next Later does not rely on exact deadlines for its structure, teams aren't asked to plan schedules ahead of time and commit to exact dates, which are, for the most part, entirely fictitious this far out. So that requirement for dates almost nearly always sees teams bake buffer time into their estimates in the hope of mitigating missing those deadlines and then being blamed and then feeling the pressure for that. Um, what often happens if you're adding a whole bunch of buffer time to your work and putting that on your roadmap is that, if you've ever heard of Parkinson's law, it's the law that states that work expands to fill that time. And so what was once a cautious estimate becomes the actual time taken. You rarely hear of teams finishing things early and then cracking on with the next thing. Things are always coming out just about on time or a little bit late, regardless of how much time you said up front you were going to spend on it. So the broader time horizons of the Now Next Later means that no one is baking in buffer time just for the sake of having it, and things actually get delivered faster. Uh, if things move faster, then more work can get done, right? More features are built. What you'll find is teams using Now Next Later deliver more often, and get things out the door faster than teams who have to spend all that time doing the planning and figuring out exactly how long they'd want it to sit on the roadmap, and then try to line them all up in a row. Agile road mapping and the Now Next Later roadmap means that your team is going to move faster and ship more, right? This is a really key selling point, and it's sometimes a bit counterintuitive. People think that having deadlines is going to get them to move faster, but it's not true. Deadlines have never inspired people to move faster. What it's really going to do is mean that you're having to protect your butts and not get as many things put on that roadmap, and therefore deliver less. One of the other things that you can emphasize here is talking about the outcomes that you're going to be getting rather than the output that you're going to be focused on, right? So each roadmap item is focused on a particular outcome, solving a particular problem for the customer and for the business. So this emphasis means that the product team is accountable for an outcome, not just those outputs. This is really key because, remember, delivered does not mean done. Results have to be measured and iterations and improvements made where needed. Products bloated with ineffective features essentially become a thing of the past, right? You're not going to have to worry about that. So with Now Next Later, teams are motivated to drive real value and deliver against their objectives, not just have a feature because the roadmap said to have a feature. So you're declaring the problem, not the solution. And the roadmap is a space to discover what's actually best and the best way to solve that problem. So road mapping and the Now Next Later format, what you want to really enforce is the fact that it's there to help you deliver greater value to the customer and to the business. Other really key thing that you want to drive home is the flexibility afforded by having this timeline or this time horizon way of working, right? You're focused on those outcomes, you're focused on the time horizon, but really you're focused on the order in which you're looking to tackle things. And you can adapt that order, right? You might finish one thing and then realize that the next most important thing is not what you thought it was last quarter. It's something new because the market's changed or people reacted differently to what it is that you built last quarter. So the roadmap format should give you space to adapt naturally as you learn more. So there might be ways that things you need to respond to. So there might be new discoveries from user research, there might be market research, there might be competitor analysis that's been done, there might be shifts in the market, shifts in the economy, lots of things happen. We know this now. There might be new opportunities, like a AI comes out or the next big thing comes out, and you realize that there's a huge opportunity to build that in. Where you're no longer beholden to building whatever it said you should build in June just because June is here. You should build what's most important for the business as that point comes up, as that time comes up, as that opportunity comes up. And there might just be changing strategic priorities, right? The company might have to shift its goals, and therefore your roadmap needs to be able to shift as well. So the now, next, later roadmapping approach, what you really want to drive home is that it's going to be allow you to respond faster to threats and capitalize on new opportunities. Right? You're going to be able to adjust your plan as you go. Other key point is that the now next later format requires all initiatives to be linked to a product objective or a company objective, right? This is an ironclad way of ensuring that the team is prioritizing and working on things that actually bring strategic value to the business. You can't put things on the roadmap just because you wanted a new feature. You've got to be able to say, what features does this problem solve? And why do we want to solve this? If you can't answer those two questions, then it probably doesn't deserve to be on your roadmap. So it's a really good forcing function to get your team thinking about the strategy and aligning the work that's being done to that company or product level strategy. So really drive that point home about that alignment. And then it's also going to help you operate with greater efficiency. Everyone loves to save a bit of time and not waste their time doing stuff that ends up not being used, right? So the now, next, later time horizons stop product teams from wasting time planning out super detailed schedules that are far in the future about what's going to be delivered. And when oftentimes that stuff just ends up getting reworked or thrown out or ignored because they naturally have to change along the way. And it's also hard to estimate that far out. And so the more that you're doing it, the more that you're making it up. And that's not a useful way to spend your time as a product manager. You could be spending that time talking to customers or learning about the market or figuring out the best thing to build next, as opposed to trying to figure out how long something's going to take in 3 months' time. It doesn't matter and you don't know. So it drives efficiencies and it's going to unlock more time for higher value product management work. Really drive this point home as well. And then the last one, this is really key for people who are in the exec team, are drive home the fact that it makes for happier teams and therefore better retention. What you're really getting here is the fact that when you remove the practice of setting deadlines too far in the future, you alleviate the pressure and fear that comes with hitting unrealistic dates. The delivery dates put in place with now next later way of working are only set once work has been defined and specifications have been written. You're not trying to plan way out and then hold people to these dates that aren't realistic. What you're really looking to do here is what you're actually looking to do here is also it reduces the amount of tech debt, right? If you have a whole bunch of projects that end up getting delivered one after the other, but you end up cutting it close at each turn, you're going to start accruing tech debt. And that tech debt stacks up, creates a tech code base that becomes unworkable. And you end up with teams that have just tons and tons of difficulties building things, unhappy developers who end up leaving, right? And so having this way of working helps to retain your staff and reduces your hiring spend, right? You don't have to replace people, you don't have to train people up. Flip this around the other way as well, right? You want to tell them about the benefits, but you also want to give them the warning about what happens if they don't, right? So delivery is slower, tech debt builds up, and you end up with a tech project, a tech stack that needs to be rewritten. Opportunities end up being missed, right? You're too blinded by what you said you were going to build at the beginning of the year, and you're halfway through the year now that you have to go build whatever it says to go do in June, that you don't look outside and say, oh, maybe we should be building this instead because this is going to solve the right problems for us. You end up with people being less accountable for the results. And you end up with your brand reputation sometimes being damaged if you build the wrong things or if you end up missing promises that you've made in this roadmap. You end up losing people in the team if they're not able to work in a autonomous way to solve the problems in the best way rather than just cranking out feature after feature, which is soul destroying. And oftentimes money is wasted building the wrong thing. So many teams end up just building stuff because it seemed like a good idea when they mapped out this roadmap at the beginning of the year and aren't actually building the right stuff. So other really key thing is that you want to make sure that you're getting you want to make sure that people on the team are feeling this win, right? So a lot of what we've spoken about so far are benefits for the wider team or for the exec team. You really want to be driving those benefits home, but also you can use these slides here to talk the sales team through or talk different stakeholders through, and we'll go through a bunch of different ones as to how they're going to win doing this. So this is a win situation. You're not taking something away. So for sales team, they're going to end up with better objection handling, right? So presenting your roadmap through problems to solve can provide your salespeople with a simple way to handle objections and answer needs, right? If a prospect says a competitor has one feature that we don't, the salesperson can drill into the problem that the feature is trying to solve, and then they can scan your roadmap, both the completed section and the now next later view, and find the roadmap initiative that explores that problem. And then they can start explaining a different feature that we might have or are soon to have that solves that problem and maybe suggest that it's a better way of solving it. So it's driving salespeople to think about the problems that people are having as opposed to just saying, tick box, do we have this feature or not compared to our competitor? You're really getting people to think about the problem view. It's also a safer way to share the roadmap, right? You might have two different types of salespeople, right? You've got one who is smart enough not to show the timeline roadmaps with prospects. But we all know some salespeople will just take that roadmap and share it with prospects and go, ta-dum, go take your pick. What would you like to buy and when would you like to buy? Because we're going to have all these cool features, which we know the roadmap never gets delivered. A timeline roadmap never gets delivered as it was written out. And so it's dangerous, right? You end up with salespeople who get mud on their face because they've made promises that the team can't keep. And so with using a now, next, later roadmap, you've taken the dates off. You're not talking about specific features that are going to be delivered by a specific date. You're able to turn that around and say, hey, here are the problems we're looking to solve. We're going to go from here to here, these types of problems. And you're not making promises of specific things that are going to be delivered for them. But you can use this as an opportunity to discover whether these problems align with your customers. And if one customer comes back and looks at your roadmap and says, oh, this isn't right for us, it's probably not a big signal. If a lot of customers look at your roadmap and say, whoa, I can't believe you're solving this problem before you solve this problem, that's good insight. And that might be a time that you can adjust that roadmap. So you can work with your salespeople to share the roadmap as you have it, get feedback on it, and use that feedback to inform you as to whether you're heading in the right direction that your customers care about, that your market cares about. And it's a huge misconception that now, next, later roadmaps cannot have dates at all. One of its biggest misconceptions. And this is the thing that often holds sales teams or even execs back. If a huge deal hangs on a particular feature being live on a particular date, then you might be able to work that out, right? You can. It doesn't mean that you don't have dates on that roadmap. It means that you're not driving that roadmap by dates. So something has to have a hard date. You can show that on the roadmap. Now, what you're giving up is that your team does need to do the project management work to line up to get that, but you're still able to show specific dates. You're still able to communicate dates where they are strategically important and externally driven, right? So it's not just about putting arbitrary dates on everything, but if something does need to be communicated, you can still communicate that on a now, next, later roadmap. If you've got a sales team on board with, or if you're trying to get the sales team on board with the now, next, later roadmap and they're pushing back on it, You might find that they're struggling because they're not used to selling the product that exists today. Right? This can be a tough conversation to have because sometimes it means that the sales team just isn't up to the job, right? They're selling something that doesn't exist yet because it's easier to get somebody to just come along and state what they want rather than working harder to find the types of leads that they actually do that actually are going to make use of your product as is. So really key thing that you can be doing is working with your sales team to identify your ideal customer profile, your ICP. And they should be able to target the right types of leads that are going to find your product useful for what it is today, rather than just constantly throwing it out to anybody and bringing in anybody. So you've got to be that voice to say, here's who is going to use our product. Here's the jobs it does solve. Go find people who need to solve those jobs. So that's a really key point, is that you've got to work with your salespeople on what your ICP is. The marketing team is often afraid of moving to the now, next, later format because they think that they need a deadline so that they can launch their features, they can launch their campaigns on the same date that you've launched your features. And that is always fraught with difficulty because what you're trying to do is you're trying to line up a development project to land on the same day as a marketing project. And if that development project gets pushed back, your marketing project has jumped the gun, right? Or they've lost money or they've lost time. What you want to do is you want to separate your hard and soft launches, right? So your soft launch comes out, and from that point, you've got a version of the product that is in a feature flagged area of your product or is in a beta subdomain or is turned on just for specific customers. And what you want to do is you turn just for your internal users or a specific set of users, maybe a beta group of people. And then from there, marketing can pick it up and they can plan out the biggest, bangest launch that they can imagine, right? But now, instead of trying to tie their launch date with your feature launch date, they're starting from a point that the feature already exists. They can get pictures of it, they can get videos of it, they can start getting testimonials of it in this soft launch format. And then from there, they can plan out a huge launch, right? Whether this takes them 6 days or 6 weeks or whatever it takes them to do this launch, it separates your soft launch from your hard launch. And at that point, that hard launch goes out, you know that feature is going to be there because it's in a feature flag mode, it's in beta. It can just be turned on as opposed to you trying to figure out if you can actually get things out on that date and possibly losing scope and quality along the way. So make sure that you use the soft launch to give your marketing team heads up on where they're going with it. Use that soft launch to give them confidence in the feature and show them what the feature is actually going to be, as opposed to them hoping it matches the original design specs from earlier on. And basically, this means that your campaigns have a better chance of success. You're always going to have a constant stream of campaigns going out. They'll just be shifted by whether it's 6 days or 6 weeks or 6 months for the marketing team to make their launch happen. But it then has a list of really solid campaigns that always work, and the product's always there for them, backed up with great testimonials and videos and everything they need to create to make that campaign really pop. And then with customer teams, right? One of the really key things with customer teams, we're talking support, customer success, account management, customer service. They no longer have to deal with complaints when dates are missing, when dates are missed, right? Because you're not sitting here making promises of what's going to be delivered and when. You're focused on solving the right problems for the business, and things are constantly going out the door because you're shipping faster. But if you have a customer facing roadmap that shows a whole bunch of due dates and delivery dates, you're beholden to either hit those dates or let somebody down. And you're no longer going to be letting people down. You're just going to be shipping the right things that make sense for your business and just constantly keeping your customers updated on what's coming or what's been launched. You no longer have to field endless feature requests. It's more focused around which problems to solve, right? So you're still going to have feature requests, but you can align them with the problem to solve and be able to give people a sense as to whether these are the types of areas that you're focusing on or whether these are areas that aren't congruent with your strategy. And you're no longer taking in customer requests and constantly thinking, oh, should we build this one or should we build that one that we heard last week? You're focused on solving problems that are important for the business. And then the roadmap itself, the now, next, later roadmap, as I said with the sales team, it's safe to share, right? It's easier to understand this roadmap. You can basically say, here's where it is we are now, here's where we're going with it, and here's the reasons why. We're trying to solve these types of problems and build this type of company. And that helps your customers understand whether your product is aligned with their longer term vision. So it's not about getting their pet feature in there. It's about whether it solves the right types of problems for them, regardless of which feature you actually end up building to solve that problem. So you can use this opportunity to get customer validation and to get buy-in on your product strategy and your vision. You can show them the now, next, later roadmap and get that buy-in. And then you can iterate your roadmap based on insights that you glean from these customer conversations. So make use of your roadmap, get it in front of customers, and then use it to get insight as to whether you're heading in the right direction that works for where the market needs you to go. Justin in the chat had a really good point here. He said, your customers can often be more forgiving than your internal teams. So once you're able to show people that you are building towards a solid vision, you're solving key problems, they're not going to get picky over which feature gets delivered when. They're going to worry that you're actually still constantly building. So show them what it is that you are building and have been building, and then show them the problems that you're solving for as you move forwards. So let's really drive this home for your team. We want to finish your presentation to your team here with some stats. And you want to say, let's not be a statistic, right? We know that 75% of businesses anticipate that software project will fail. That whole planning things out in mini projects lined up on your timeline roadmap, 75% of them aren't going to meet the time, scope, or cost or quality requirements upfront anyways. So what is this whole planning thing that we're doing anyways? It feels like a big waste of time. We also know that 32% of IT projects face challenges because they don't have clear objectives. So let's solve that by making sure that everything on our roadmap is tied back to an objective. If you can't tie it back to an objective, don't put it on the roadmap. We also know that 45% of features and functions in software projects are never used. So let's try to solve for that problem. Make sure that we are building stuff that solves real problems and aren't just being put on the roadmap because somebody asked for it to be on the roadmap, which frankly is how a lot of that stuff gets on your timeline roadmaps. And we also know that 17% of projects run the risk of failing so badly that they threaten the existence of the company. So let's not put the business out of business. Let's make sure that we're focused on solving the right problems in the right order and tying our problems, our strategic steps, the problems we're trying to solve back to strategic goals for the business and not wasting any time, not risking the business by building projects so badly that it takes down the whole company. So with that, I recommend that you wrap up. This is why we've got a slide deck here for you to use. You wrap up and then ask questions, right? Get people's feedback. A product management process, a road mapping process is something that you can build and then you can iterate on. This is why we have things like in ProdPad, the now, next, later columns can be renamed. It's not a dogmatic approach. It doesn't say you have to put this on the roadmap in a certain way. You can use it in a very flexible way and take this feedback from your team. Figure out what works for you. If you need to do Q1, Q2, Q3, or some variation of that to get people on board, do that. But take this time to ask questions and get people on board with it. So grab a screenshot of this if you like. This is a course that you can take. We've written this course that outlines what a now, next, later roadmap is, what are the benefits in a lot more detail than what we've covered today, and then practical steps to transition from your timeline roadmap to your now, next, later roadmap. So take this course and prepare yourself with this learning so that when your team is asking questions, you're prepared. Lesson 4 is all about convincing your stakeholders, right? Getting those tricky stakeholders on board. We have shared this deck with you as well. So grab a screenshot of this page too. This deck is basically the same deck that I was just showing you a minute ago, but it has notes in the speaker section that you can use to talk your team through and get them on board. It's completely editable, so take out the parts that don't work for you, add in parts that you think will work for your particular context, but this is a tool that you can use to get your team on board. Lauren's just asked as to whether we're going to be sharing this with the recording. Yes, absolutely. So you're all going to get a copy of this. Feel free to share it with your teams, share it with your fellow product people, share it around, make use of it. We want to just help people get away from timeline roadmaps and move them to now, next, later. And on that note, I want to invite questions.
That was great, Jenna. Thank you very much. We've actually got a lot of questions.
All right, let's tackle them.
In fact, Ryan says it feels like we need an after party. There's so many questions come in. So listen, we've only got 5 minutes. We might not get to all these questions. If we don't, I'll collate the questions, extract some answers from Janna's head, and maybe include those in the email afterwards. Okay, so where shall we start?
So Ryan asked, do we have any good visuals that show how attempting to the team make more at the same time causes them to slow down? I have seen something like this. So I don't have one in this deck, but I can definitely point you to something that I think might be helpful. Or if not, I can scratch it out. I've done it that same sort of thing on a piece of paper before and showed it to people to make that case. So really what you're looking for is something to really nail home that point that having people work on multiple things at the same time actually makes them slower. And that is a truism, right? And what often happens with the timeline roadmap is that they end up trying to tackle a whole bunch of different things and they don't actually move faster.
This was an interesting question, Janna. How would you respond to the claim that it won't work for B2B software because enterprise customers require reliable time and feature-based roadmaps, or they won't buy in?
So I'd actually push back on that because most of the time, enterprise customers don't require that, right? Enterprise customers, just like any other customers, buying the product that you have today. If you're not able to sell that product as it is today, either the product isn't good enough and shouldn't be out on the market with a big sales team trying to sell it because it's not ready, or you're selling to the wrong types of customers. Enterprise customers like to throw their weight around. They like to say, hey, we're so big that you should go build this one thing. But what you should be doing is turning that around and saying, that's good feedback, and we're going to take that on board, but focus on building the thing that's best for the wider market and is going to get you more of the right types of customers, whether those are enterprise or not. So if you've got like a whole bunch of enterprise customers asking for the same thing, you might want to prioritize that, right? You're moving something up in the roadmap. But each time you take a custom piece of work and you say, this enterprise customer wants to buy a product, but it needs this one custom thing that no one else is ever going to use again, that is work that you're going to spend for that month or several months building that thing that you won't be able to spend doing discovery work and experimentation-led work that's going to drive the product to the right types of customers in the future. If you're just constantly building these custom pieces of work that don't fit with your product roadmap, you're going to end up with a Frankenstein of a product that can't really be sold to anybody and can't be supported well either. So it's really important to actually think about whether these things are worth doing or not. And oftentimes teams who are in the habit of doing that aren't spending enough time finding the right customers, that ICP. We're stuck in that agency trap, right? What they're really doing is they are selling off pieces of their time in order to get small bits of cash or sometimes large bits of cash. But they've got to be, and I've got a whole talk that I can share on this, the agency trap. You've got to make sure that you're not falling into this agency trap and building stuff just because someone said to jump, right? So you've got to find that line.
Janna, we had a couple of people wanting to know your thoughts on jobs to be done, and that's sitting as part of Now, Next, Later.
Yeah, absolutely. So jobs to be done works really well with the now, next, later. Basically, it aligns with the problems to be solved, right? If you're saying that there's a whole bunch of customers who want to solve for this particular job, and your product doesn't do that now, then the problem to solve is, well, to allow for people to solve that problem, to do that job. And so that becomes the placeholder on your roadmap. And within there, you might have a bunch of different experiments or things that you can do to help them get to that point to be able to solve that particular job. So jobs to be done is a really good way of thinking about things because it aligns your customer problems with your business problems.
And we've got Kayla and Catherine are both experiencing the same problem. How do you set limits on what classifies as now I have stakeholders that try to push a lot of items into the now when we simply don't have the resources to
Yeah.
tackle every item in the now column.
Yeah. If everything is now, nothing is now, right? So
Exactly.
there's a couple things you can do. Treat it very much like a Kanban board with work in progress limits. In ProdPad, you can see how many initiatives and how many ideas you have in each column. And if you have only one team working on stuff, you probably shouldn't have 10 different now things, because are you actually working on that many right now, or actually are they just trying to make them look like they're happening closer by not putting them in the next? So use that forcing function. What are you actually working on right now? What is in active discovery and active delivery that's keeping your team busy right now? Everything else put into the next and prioritize in there. The other thing is trying not to go too granular. Some people break their problems into really granular little tiny problems, and they'll have 20 different problems. And actually, if you take a step back, you'd realize this is one problem area and this is another problem area. Group them together and tackle them. And as they move into your now column, you can break them down into more detail, but try not to have a hugely granular roadmap that becomes a pain in the butt to read. Ideally, your roadmap shouldn't be any more than what fits on a screen or two, maybe a scroll, but not a big scroll. You want something that if you printed it out, that fits within a printed page or two, so you can hand it to somebody and they can read it. You don't want an overwhelming roadmap with all the things. It's not a replacement for your backlog. Otherwise, it doesn't actually tell people what your strategy is.
We are now out of time. We still have a whole bunch of questions here that we haven't answered. So I think best thing we'll do is, like I say, I will collate them all and we will write out the answers and make sure you can all see what was asked and indeed Janna's reply to that. But thank you very much, Janna. That was great. Like I say, we will email round both the recording and the course and the slide deck, so you can take that away and use that with your stakeholders. So best of luck making the move to now next later, and do let us know how you get on and if you want any more help.
Yep, absolutely. So everybody's looking to make this transition, get in touch. Let us know how you get on with it. Let us know who your tricky stakeholder is, and we'll be happy to help you through, provide any guidance on that. We've probably written something for it. And as Megan said, that we are going to take your questions and make sure that we get those answers out for you, because this is an area that is fraught with contention. So let's help you get through it. Good luck with everything. Grab that presentation, and we'll see you on the flip side when you've got your now next later.
Good luck, everyone.
And bye for now.